In the shadowy depths of the royal forest, fate weaves its most unexpected threads. When Helena discovers a blood-soaked crown hidden among fallen leaves, she has no idea that this golden circle will forever change her destiny. What terrible violence led to such a regal treasure being abandoned, stained with fresh blood? The answer lies with the wounded stranger she finds nearby, a handsome man with no memory of his past, whose life she saves without knowing his true identity. As they build a life together in her secluded cottage, neither suspects that powerful forces are hunting them, that royal blood runs through his veins, or that a treacherous brother believes him dead. Their growing love, born in the simplicity of forest shadows, will soon be tested in the dangerous halls of power where betrayal wears a familiar face. Will their extraordinary love survive when the truth is revealed? Can a blacksmith's daughter stand against those who would kill a prince to claim his throne? Discover the breathtaking tale of courage, treachery, and a love that defies all boundaries in The Young Woman Found a Blood-Stained Crown in the Forest. Remember to follow our channel for more captivating medieval romances like this video, and comment to let us know where you're watching from. The muffled cry of a raven sliced through the forest's silence as the scent of moss and damp earth filled the morning air. Idlina, a 38-year-old blacksmith's daughter, hurried between the trees, fleeing from a forced marriage to a man she despised. Her long chestnut hair flowed behind her like a banner of rebellion, her emerald eyes scanning the path ahead for any sign of pursuers. The hem of her simple linen dress was already muddied, but she cared little for appearances now. Freedom was all that mattered. Suddenly, her foot caught on an exposed root, sending her tumbling forward. She landed hard upon a wet leaf, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. As she pushed herself up, a chill ran through her body. Her hand was stained with fresh blood, crimson and bright against her pale skin. Her heart raced wildly within her chest as her eyes widened in shock and fear. What manner of evil is this? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. Glancing around with growing trepidation, Helena's gaze fell upon something that made her blood run cold. There, nestled between the twisted roots of an ancient oak tree, lay a golden crown, its gleaming surface still wet with blood, as if it had been violently torn from someone's head. The stark contrast between the radiant gold and the dark red blood paralyzed her. For a heartbeat, she feared she had stumbled upon a grave crime, and her eyes darted around the clearing, feeling unseen eyes upon her. But there was no one. Only the whisper of leaves dancing in the breeze and the distant crack of a breaking branch that made her jump. With trembling hands, she reached for the crown, the cold, damp metal a stark contrast to her warm, quivering fingers. She turned it over carefully, noting the intricate craftsmanship, the precious gems embedded within its arches. It was undoubtedly royal, a king's crown, or perhaps a prince's. "I should flee this place," Helena murmured, her instinct urging her to run as far as possible. Yet something stronger, curiosity, destiny, or perhaps what some might call love, compelled her to remain. Her breathing came in short, rapid gasps, her chest rising and falling as she made a fateful decision. With deliberate movements, she wrapped the crown in a piece of cloth from her satchel and secured it inside. Then, her eyes traced the trail of blood droplets that led deeper into the forest. "What am I doing?" she asked herself, even as her feet began to follow the crimson path. "This is madness." Yet she continued, drawn forward by an invisible thread of fate that had begun to weave itself around her life. The birds sang their morning songs, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath their perches. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath as Helena ventured further, following the sporadic pattern of blood that stained fallen leaves and exposed stones. Then she heard it, a weak groan, almost inaudible, blending with the bird song and the gentle rustling of the forest. Her heart skipped a beat. Someone was alive, injured, and close by. "Hello?" she called out softly, her voice betraying her fear. "Is anyone there?" Only the wind answered, but the groan came again, slightly louder. This time, Helena pushed aside a curtain of hanging vines and gasped at what she saw. There, concealed among the ferns and roots, lay a man, unconscious and gravely wounded. His rich clothing, though now torn and soiled, hinted at nobility. Blood matted his dark hair, flowing from a deep gash across his temple. His face, though pale from blood loss, was strikingly handsome. Strong jawline covered with a short beard, high cheekbones, and full lips now drained of color. Helena knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she checked for signs of life. His pulse was weak but steady. He was alive but barely. "Sir?" she whispered, gently touching his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" The man's eyelids fluttered briefly, revealing a glimpse of intense blue eyes before closing again. He mumbled something incoherent, then fell silent once more. Helena glanced around nervously. Whoever had attacked this man might still be nearby. The crown in her satchel suddenly felt heavier, a burden of knowledge and danger. This was no ordinary traveler. The crown must be his, which meant he was a royal. She breathed, her mind racing with implications. God help me, what have I stumbled into? She knew she couldn't leave him there to die. Whatever had happened, whatever danger might follow, her conscience wouldn't allow her to abandon a wounded soul to the mercy of the forest, or worse, to those who had tried to kill him. With determination born of compassion, Helena tore strips from her underskirt to bind his most severe wounds. The man was large, much heavier than she, but somehow she managed to prop him up. Supporting his weight against her shoulder, she began the slow, painful journey toward her small cottage, hidden deep within the forest. "Stay with me," she urged him as his feet dragged along the ground. Just a little further, the journey seemed endless. Every step was a struggle, every yard gained a victory. Sweat beaded on her brow despite the cool morning air, and her muscles screamed in protest. Yet she persisted, driven by something she couldn't name, duty, perhaps, or destiny. As they finally approached her modest cottage, Helena couldn't know that she had just altered the course of her life forever. The crown in her bag, fallen. In his escape, now belonged to her, and the man she was saving, a man without name or memory, was to become her future husband. The man groaned again, his head lolling against her shoulder. In his delirium, he grasped her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a grip that spoke of desperation and trust. "Safe," he murmured, the single word barely audible. "Yes," Helena replied, not knowing if he could hear her. "You're safe now. I will protect you." Little did she know how prophetic those words would prove to be, for this man was William, the exiled prince whom everyone believed dead, and the blood-stained crown she now possessed was the key to a kingdom, a conspiracy, and a love story that would echo through the ages. As she pushed open the door to her cottage with her foot, struggling under the weight of the injured prince, Helena had no way of knowing that fate had chosen her for an extraordinary role. The simple life she had known was ending, and a new chapter, one filled with danger, passion, and ultimate triumph, was just beginning. The raven that had startled her earlier now perched on a branch overlooking the cottage, its beady eyes watching as the door closed behind them. It cawed once, as if announcing to the forest that the wheels of destiny had been set in motion. Then it spread its wings and flew toward the distant castle, where a usurper sat uneasily upon a stolen throne, unaware that his carefully orchestrated plans were already beginning to unravel. In the cottage, Helena laid the unconscious man on her simple bed, her mind filled with questions, but her heart somehow certain that everything had changed. The crown, hidden in her satchel, caught the light from the window, a golden promise of things to come. The faint golden light of dawn filtered through the small windows of Helena's cottage, casting long shadows across the earthen floor. 3 days had passed since she had found the wounded stranger in the forest, and still he drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. Helena moved quietly around her humble abode, a wooden bowl of fresh water in her hands, her brow furrowed with concern. She approached the bed where the man lay, his breathing now steadier than before, though his face remained pale as moonlight. Helena sat beside him, dipping a clean cloth into the cool water before gently pressing it against his forehead. The wound at his temple had begun to heal, thanks to her careful tending with poultices of yarrow and comfrey, but the danger had not yet passed. "Who are you?" she whispered, studying his noble features. The strong line of his jaw, now covered with several days' growth of beard, the elegant arch of his brows, the curve of lips that occasionally moved in silent conversation with ghosts from his past. "What secrets do you carry?" As if in response to her whispered question, the man's eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes of startling blue, the deep, clear blue of a summer sky. For a moment, confusion clouded his gaze, then panic set in. He attempted to sit up, only to fall back with a groan of pain. "Be still," Helena urged, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're safe here." The man's eyes darted around the cottage, taking in the hanging herbs drying from the rafters, the modest furnishings, and finally settling on Helena's face. "Where?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Where am I?" "My home," she replied, offering him a cup of water. "I found you in the forest, gravely wounded. You've been here 3 days now." He accepted the water gratefully, his hand trembling slightly as he drank. When he finished, he looked at her with eyes that seemed to search for something just beyond reach. "And who are you, my rescuer?" "Helena," she said simply, "daughter of the blacksmith from Oakvale Village." She hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted her since finding him. "And you, sir, what shall I call you?" A shadow passed over his face, and his brow furrowed in concentration. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, he shook his head, wincing at the movement. I cannot remember." Helena's heart sank. She had suspected as much from his fevered ramblings, but hearing him confirm it made the situation all the more real and dangerous. "Nothing at all? Not your name or where you're from?" He closed his eyes, his face contorted with effort. "There are fragments, flashes of light, a feast hall, the sound of swords clashing." His eyes opened again, filled with frustration and fear. "But my name, my life, it's as if a veil has been drawn across my mind." Helena nodded, trying to hide her concern. "The blow to your head was severe. Perhaps with time, your memories will return." She didn't mention the crown, now hidden beneath a loose floorboard under her bed. Something told her to keep that secret, at least for now. "Until then," she continued, attempting a reassuring smile, "I shall have to call you something. Would desconocido, unknown one, suffice?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "An unusual name, but fitting, I suppose." Over the next week, as autumn winds began to whisper through the forest, the man Helena called desconocido slowly regained his strength. Though his memory remained fragmented, his body remembered skills his mind had forgotten. His hands knew how to chop wood with efficiency, how to draw water from the well without spilling a drop, how to mend a broken chair leg with the precision of a craftsman. Helena watched him with growing curiosity and, she had to admit to herself, growing affection. There was a gentleness to him that belied his obvious strength, a courteous manner that spoke of noble upbringing despite his claims of amnesia. In the evenings, They would sit before the hearth, and Helena would tell him stories of the village, of her childhood, of her escape from an arranged marriage to the brutish son of the local tax collector. "You are brave," he told her one evening, the firelight dancing across his features, now healthier and more handsome than ever. "To flee into the forest alone, risking wolves and outlaws rather than surrender your freedom." Helena felt her cheeks warm at his praise. "It wasn't bravery so much as desperation," she admitted, "though now I wonder if it was fate that guided my steps that morning." Their eyes met across the small space between them, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition perhaps of the strange bond that had formed in their shared isolation. Late that night, while Desconocido slept soundly on his pallet near the hearth, Helena knelt beside her bed and carefully pried up the loose floorboard. The crown gleamed in the moonlight that streamed through the window, its gold and jewels seeming almost alive with inner fire. She traced the intricate patterns with her fingertip, feeling the weight of its significance. Who was he? A noble lord? A prince? The crown was clearly royal, but if she revealed it to him now, would it help or harm his recovery? And what of the danger that had nearly taken his life in the forest? Might it follow him here, to her door? Helena replaced the floorboard and returned to her bed, her mind troubled by questions without answers. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant sound of horses' hooves, too distant to wake the sleeping man, but clear enough to send a shiver of foreboding down Helena's spine. The hunt had begun, though for what or whom she could not yet know. All she knew was that the man sleeping peacefully by her hearth had become precious to her in ways she had never anticipated, and that the blood-stained crown beneath her floor might be the key to his salvation, or his destruction. Autumn had fully embraced the forest, painting the leaves in hues of amber, crimson, and gold. 3 weeks had passed since Helena had found the wounded stranger, and the rhythm of their days together had taken on a comfortable familiarity. The man she called Desconocido moved with increasing strength and purpose, though the shadows of his forgotten past still haunted his eyes. On this particular morning, Helena awoke to the rhythmic sound of chopping wood. She slipped from her bed and moved to the cottage door, opening it to find Desconocido with an axe in his hands, his broad shoulders flexing with each powerful stroke. He had removed his shirt despite the morning chill, and Helena couldn't help but notice the scars that marked his torso, some old and faded, others newer, speaking of battles fought and survived. "You should not strain yourself," she called, pulling her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Your wounds are still healing." He turned to her, a smile warming his features. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cool air, and his dark hair, now grown longer, was tied back with a strip of leather. "My body remembers what my mind forgets," he replied, setting the axe down and gathering the split logs in his arms. "And I would earn my keep here." Helena felt a flutter in her chest at his words, at the easy domesticity that had grown between them. "You owe me nothing," she said softly. "Your company has been payment enough for your care." Something flickered in his eyes then, a warmth, a tenderness that made her breath catch. But before he could respond, a sharp pain seemed to seize him. The logs tumbled from his grasp as he clutched his head, a groan escaping his lips. "What is it?" Helena rushed to his side, her heart pounding with sudden fear. "Is it the wound?" Desconocido's face had gone pale, his eyes squeezed shut. "No, not the wound," he managed through gritted teeth. "It's memories, flashes. They come without warning, like lightning across a dark sky." She guided him to a fallen log where they could sit. "Tell me," she urged, taking his hand in hers. "What do you see?" He drew a shuddering breath, his fingers tightening around hers. A great hall. Stone walls hung with banners, men in armor, a face, a man's face, So like my own, it could be my reflection, yet different, colder. He opened his eyes, looking at her with confusion and pain. And blood, always blood. Helena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. The crown hidden beneath her floorboards seemed to call to her, demanding to be revealed, but she hesitated still. "These may be memories returning," she said carefully. "Perhaps from the day you were injured." He nodded slowly. "But they are fragments only, pieces of a puzzle I cannot solve." His gaze drifted to the forest beyond the small clearing where her cottage stood. "Sometimes I wonder if I wish to solve it at all." Helena followed his gaze, understanding his meaning. There was peace here, in their simple existence away from the world. Whatever life he had led before, whatever dangers it held, seemed distant in the sanctuary they had created together. That evening, as they shared a simple meal of rabbit stew and dark bread, Helena noticed how Desconocido's eyes kept returning to her face, studying her as if memorizing every feature. "What is it?" she asked finally, setting down her wooden spoon. "You look at me as if I might vanish before your eyes." A smile touched his lips, though his eyes remained serious. "Perhaps I fear that when my memory returns, it is this, you, this place, these moments that I will forget." Helena's heart quickened at his words. And would that be so terrible? To forget a humble cottage and a blacksmith's daughter? "It would be like forgetting how to breathe," he replied softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "For you have become as necessary to me as air." The intensity in his blue eyes made her tremble. No man had ever looked at her thus, with such tenderness and longing. Not the village boys who had teased and flirted, nor the tax collector's brutish son who had sought to claim her. This was different, deeper, more profound. Later that night, after Desconocido had retired to his pallet by the hearth, Helena once again lifted the floorboard beneath her bed. The crown gleamed in the candlelight, its golden arches catching the flame and reflecting it back 100-fold. She ran her fingers over the intricate metalwork, feeling the coolness of the gold, the sharp edges of the gems. Who was he, this man who spoke of her as if she were precious beyond measure? And what would happen when he remembered the truth of his identity? Would he still look at her with such warmth, or would duty and station reclaim him, leaving her with nothing but memories? She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear him approach until his shadow fell across her. Helena gasped, nearly dropping the crown, as she looked up to find Desconocido standing in the doorway to her small bedchamber, his expression unreadable. "In the dim light, I heard you moving about," he said quietly. "I feared you might be ill." Helena quickly covered the crown with a cloth, though she knew he must have glimpsed it. "It's nothing," she said, her voice unsteady. "Just something I found." He moved closer, kneeling beside her. "In the forest?" he asked, and there was a strange note in his voice, not accusation, but a kind of wondering. "The day you found me." She nodded, unable to lie to him. "Yes, it was nearby." His hand moved toward the cloth-covered object, then stopped, trembling slightly. "May I?" Helena hesitated only a moment before drawing back the cloth. The crown caught the light once more, and as Desconocido gazed upon it, a visible shudder ran through him. "I've seen this," he whispered. "In my dreams." Their eyes met over the gleaming gold, and in that moment, the world outside their cottage, with all its dangers and intrigues, seemed to press closer, threatening the sanctuary they had built together. The summer sun hung high in the cloudless sky, casting its golden warmth over the lush forest landscape. It had been nearly a month since the night Helena had revealed the crown to Desconocido, yet the revelation had brought no flood of memories as they had both feared and hoped. Instead, it had become a shared secret between them, a mystery they contemplated together during the long evenings by the hearth. Today, Helena had suggested they venture to a special place she knew, a hidden cliff overlooking the vast valley, beyond the forest's edge. It was there she gathered rare herbs that grew in the rocky soil, herbs essential for her healing poultices and tinctures. "It's not much farther," Helena called over her shoulder, her chestnut hair dancing in the breeze as she navigated the narrow, winding path with practiced ease. Her simple blue dress, cinched at the waist with a leather belt, from which hung a small pouch of seeds and a knife, fluttered around her ankles as she climbed. Desconocido followed close behind, carrying a woven basket for their gathered herbs and a small bundle containing bread, cheese, and a flask of mead for their midday meal. His strength had fully returned, and he moved with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to physical exertion. The wound at his temple had healed to a thin scar, partly hidden by his dark hair, which now brushed his shoulders. "I'm beginning to think this special place of yours is a myth," he teased, though his smile revealed he didn't mind the journey. Every day spent in Helena's company was a gift he treasured, even as questions about his past continued to haunt him. Helena paused, turning to face him with mock indignation. "A myth? Sir, you wound me with your lack of faith." Her green eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, we've arrived." She stepped aside, revealing the breathtaking vista that opened. Before them, the cliff jutted out over the valley like the prow of a great stone ship, offering an uninterrupted view of rolling hills, distant villages, and the silver ribbon of a river winding its way through the landscape. Far on the horizon, barely visible, through the summer haze, stood the towers of a castle. "By all that's holy," Desconocido breathed, stepping forward to stand beside her. "It's magnificent." Helena watched his face as he took in the view, noting how his eyes lingered on the distant castle. Did some part of him recognize it? Did some buried memory stir at the sight? But his expression revealed nothing beyond appreciation for the beauty spread before them. "This is my thinking place," she said softly. "When life in the village became too confining, when my father's plans for my marriage grew too pressing, I would come here to remember that the world is vast and full of possibilities." Desconocido turned to her, his blue eyes intense. "And now, what possibilities do you see now, Helena?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Helena felt her heart quicken, aware of how close they stood, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair and burnished his skin to gold. "I see," she began, then faltered, uncertain how to express the tumult of emotions he stirred within her. "I see a future I never imagined." A gust of wind whipped around them suddenly, stronger than before, tugging at Helena's hair and dress. She laughed, spreading her arms as if to embrace the wild air. "Isn't it glorious," she called over the wind's howl, "to stand here above the world and feel so alive?" Desconocido watched her, entranced by her spirit, her fearlessness. In that moment, with her hair streaming like a banner and her face alight with joy, she was more beautiful to him than any sight the cliff could offer. Without conscious thought, he reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers. Helena's laughter subsided as she felt his touch. She turned to him, her smile softening into something more vulnerable, more questioning. The wind continued to swirl around them, creating a private world of sound and sensation. "Helena," he said, his voice almost lost in the wind's song, "I may not know who I was, but I know who I am when I'm with you." He drew her gently closer, his free hand rising to cup her cheek. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, flushed with sun and emotion. Helena's breath caught in her throat as she saw the tenderness in his gaze, the longing that mirrored her own. "And who are you when you're with me?" she whispered, hardly daring to hope for his answer. "A man reborn," he replied simply. "A man who has found something more precious than any crown or kingdom." Then, as naturally as the sun rises each morning, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question asked and answered in the meeting of mouths. Helena's eyes fluttered closed as she surrendered to the sweetness of the moment, her hands rising to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The wind wrapped around them like a cloak, and the world beyond the cliff's edge seemed to fall away. There was only this, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her closer, the warmth of his mouth moving against hers with increasing urgency, the dizzying sense that everything in her life had led to this singular, perfect moment. When at last they parted, both breathless and flushed, Helena kept her eyes closed for a heartbeat longer, wanting to preserve the feeling, to commit every sensation to memory. When she opened them, she found Desconocido gazing at her with such tenderness that tears pricked at her eyes. "I never thought," she began, then shook her head, smiling through her emotion. "I never dared to hope." He pressed his forehead gently against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "Nor I," he admitted, "but fate, it seems, had other plans when it led you to me in the forest." They remained on the cliff for hours, gathering herbs as intended, but frequently pausing to share kisses and quiet words of affection. The world seemed transformed by their newfound closeness, every color brighter, every sound sweeter. Even the distant castle, which had so captured Desconocido's attention earlier, was forgotten in the joy of the present moment. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they reluctantly gathered their belongings and began the journey back to Helena's cottage. They walked hand in hand, stopping occasionally to kiss beneath the dappled forest canopy, both marveling at how naturally they had crossed the threshold from friendship to love. The cottage, when they reached it, looked exactly as they had left it that morning, yet somehow different, more like a home, a shared sanctuary. Helena moved to open the door, but as she stepped across the threshold, her foot caught on a loose floorboard. She stumbled forward, dropping the basket of herbs, which overturned and spilled its contents across the earthen floor. "Are you hurt?" Desconocido asked, kneeling beside her with concern etched on his features. "No, just clumsy," Helena laughed, reaching to gather the scattered herbs. But as she moved, she realized with horror that the loose floorboard was the very one beneath which she had hidden the crown after showing it to him. In her fall, she had dislodged it completely, and now the golden circlet lay exposed in the fading evening light. The golden crown gleamed in the fading light, its jewels catching the last rays of sunset streaming through the cottage window. Time seemed to freeze as Desconocido stared at the royal circlet, now fully exposed from its hiding place beneath the floorboard. Helena remained motionless, her breath caught in her throat, watching as a myriad of emotions flickered across his handsome face: confusion, recognition, and then something deeper, more painful. With trembling hands, he reached for the crown, his fingers hovering just above its polished surface as if afraid to touch it. "This," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I've seen this before, not just in dreams." Helena knelt beside him, her heart pounding so fiercely she was certain he must hear it. "You showed recognition when I first revealed it to you," she said softly, "but nothing more came of it. I thought perhaps it was just a passing familiarity." Desconocido shook his head slowly, then with a deep breath grasped the crown. The moment his fingers closed around the cool metal, a shudder ran through his powerful frame. His eyes widened, and he gasped, as if struck by a physical blow. "William," he breathed, the name emerging like a ghost from his lips. "I am William." Helena's hand flew to her mouth. "William, you remember?" His eyes, now bright with unshed tears, met hers. "Not everything, but enough. My name, my title." His Gaze returned to the crown, his knuckles white as he gripped it tightly. I am Prince William of Ravenwood, rightful heir to the throne. A bitter laugh escaped him. Or I was, until my brother decided I had lived long enough. The pieces began to fall into place in Helena's mind. The expensive fabric of his clothing when she found him, the regal bearing he could never quite disguise, the crown itself, clearly of royal craftsmanship. Your brother, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. He did this to you? He tried to kill you? William, for she could no longer think of him as desconocido, nodded grimly. Richard, my twin, younger by mere minutes. We were hunting in the royal forest, separated from our guards. His brow furrowed with the effort of recollection. I remember dismounting by a stream, then pain, blinding pain at the back of my head. He raised his hand to the scar at his temple, his eyes distant with memory. I turned in time to see him, my own brother, wielding a rock, his face, God help me, his face was twisted with such hatred. I fell, but somehow found the strength to flee. He pursued me through the forest. I could hear him calling to me, his voice so casual, as if we were still at play. Helena took his free hand in both of hers, offering what comfort she could as he relived the betrayal. The crown lay between them, a tangible reminder of all that had been lost and all that now hung in the balance. Why? She asked gently. Why would your own brother turn against you? William's jaw tightened. Power. What else? Our father, King Edward, is ailing. The succession draws near. Richard has always been ambitious, always coveted what was mine by right of birth. A shadow crossed his face. And perhaps he feared what kind of king I might become. Too merciful, too concerned with the common folk for his taste. Helena felt a chill run through her at his words. The peaceful existence they had shared seemed suddenly fragile, threatened by forces beyond their control. What will you do now? She asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. William looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a complex mixture of love and regret. I must return, he said simply. Richard will have told the court I was killed in a hunting accident. He will be consolidating his power, preparing to take the throne when my father passes. His hand tightened around hers. I cannot let that happen, not only for my sake, but for the kingdom's. Richard would be a cruel ruler, taxing the poor to fill his coffers, waging wars for glory rather than necessity. Helena nodded, fighting back tears. She had known this moment would come, had feared it from the first day she found the crown, yet now that it was upon them, the pain was sharper than she had imagined. When will you go? She asked, proud that her voice remained steady. Tomorrow, he replied, then added more softly, but not alone. Helena, come with me. The request caught her off guard. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. Come with you? To the castle, to court? William set the crown aside and took both her hands in his. Yes, to all of it. His eyes searched hers, filled with an earnestness that made her heart ache. I love you, Helena. These weeks with you have shown me what truly matters in this life. I will not leave you behind. Helena's mind reeled with the implications. She, a blacksmith's daughter at court, among nobles and ladies who had been raised from birth for such a life. But I know nothing of court ways, she protested. I would embarrass you, and surely you must marry a noble woman, form alliances through your choice of bride. No, William interrupted firmly. That is the old way of thinking. If I am to be king, I will choose my own queen, one who has proven her worth through compassion and courage, not through bloodlines. He cupped her face gently. You saved my life, Helena. You tended my wounds, gave me shelter, showed me kindness without knowing who I was. There is no nobler heart in all the kingdom. Tears spilled from Helena's eyes at his words. the sincerity in his voice, the love shining in his eyes. They were everything she had ever dreamed of, yet the obstacles before them seemed insurmountable. "Your court would never accept me," she whispered. "And what of your brother? If he was willing to kill you once, he will not hesitate to try again, especially if you return with a common-born woman at your side." William's expression hardened with determination. "Let them try to stop us. I am the rightful heir, and with this crown as proof," he gestured to the golden circlet beside them, "I can rally those loyal to my father's true wishes. As for Richard," a grimness settled over his features, "he must answer for his treachery." The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long shadows across the cottage that had been their sanctuary. Outside, an owl called into the gathering. Darkness, its mournful cry seeming to echo the uncertainty that now hung between them. Helena took a deep breath, searching her heart. She loved this man. Prince or commoner, it made no difference to her. But could she follow him into a world so different from her own, a world of intrigue and danger, where her very presence at his side might put them both at greater risk? "I need time," she said finally, "just until morning. This is overwhelming." William nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Until morning, then." He leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "But know this, Helena. Whatever you decide, my heart is yours. If you cannot come with me, then perhaps I shall not go at all." The dead of night wrapped the forest in a blanket of silence, broken only by the gentle crackle of dying embers in the hearth. Helena lay awake on her bed, her mind too full of turmoil for sleep to find her. Beside the hearth, William slumbered fitfully, his handsome face troubled even in repose. The crown sat between them on the small wooden table, its golden surface catching the faint glow of the fire, a silent witness to the decision that hung in the balance. Helena had nearly convinced herself to accompany William to the castle, to brave whatever dangers awaited them there, when a sound from outside froze her blood, distant at first, then growing clearer, the unmistakable rhythm of horses' hooves, the jingle of metal, the low murmur of men's voices. She slipped from her bed and moved silently to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. What she saw made her heart stutter with fear. Torches blazed in the darkness, carried by mounted men in the royal livery, at least a dozen of them, picking their way through the forest with deliberate purpose. "William," she hissed, rushing to his side and shaking him urgently. "Wake up! Soldiers are coming!" He was instantly alert, years of training asserting themselves, despite his weeks of amnesia. "How many? How close?" he asked, already reaching for his boots. "A dozen, maybe more, and close, too close. We have minutes at most." Helena moved with swift efficiency, gathering essentials into a small sack: bread, dried meat, a water flask. They must have been searching the villages, asking questions. "Someone must have seen you, recognized you." William nodded grimly as he pulled on his tunic. "Or recognized you as the woman who disappeared into the forest the same day the prince allegedly died." He moved to the table and seized the crown, wrapping it quickly in a piece of cloth before securing it in Helena's pack. "We must flee now. Is there a back way out?" Helena nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened her cloak. "A path behind the cottage, through the dense thicket. It's narrow and hidden. They might miss it in the dark." The sound of hooves grew louder, accompanied now by the barking of hounds. Helena's breath caught in her throat. They were using tracking dogs. Their chances of escaping undetected had just diminished considerably. "Come," William urged, taking her hand. They slipped out the back door into the chill night air, the forest around them alive with the sounds of pursuit. The moon, nearly full, cast enough light to see by, but also enough to be seen if they weren't careful. They moved swiftly along the hidden path, ducking under low-hanging branches, their boots making little sound on the carpet of pine needles. Behind them, the voices grew louder, more urgent. A man shouted commands, his tone authoritative and cold. "That's Edmund, captain of the Royal Guard," William whispered, his face grim in the moonlight. "Richard's man, body and soul. He would not be here unless my brother specifically sent him." They pressed on, deeper into the forest, the path growing steeper as it led toward the foothills. Helena's lungs burned with the effort, but fear drove her forward, her hand clutched tightly in William's. Suddenly, the baying of the hounds changed pitch, more excited, more frenzied. "They've found the cottage," William said, his voice tight, "and are sent with it. We must move faster." They broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. Branches whipped at their faces, roots threatened to trip them at every step, but they pushed on, driven by the growing clamor of pursuit. The path widened slightly as they approached a small clearing, moonlight streaming down to illuminate their way. Helena's heart lifted momentarily. They were making good progress, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. But as they reached the center of the clearing, the sound of hooves erupted from the trees ahead of them. A second group of soldiers had circled around, cutting off their escape route. "Back!" William hissed, pulling Helena toward the edge of the clearing. But it was too late. Torchlight flared from behind as Edmund and his men caught up to them, closing the trap. "Well, well," Edmund's voice rang out, cold and satisfied. "The dead prince rises. How inconvenient for some." William pushed Helena behind him, his body tense as a drawn bow. "Edmund," he acknowledged, his voice steady despite their dire situation. "Still doing my brother's dirty work, I see." The captain's laugh was without humor. "Your brother? You mean His Majesty, the King Regent? Your father's health has taken a turn for the worse, I'm afraid. Richard rules in his stead now." Helena felt William stiffen at the news. "My father lives?" "Barely," Edmund replied, signaling his men to spread out, surrounding them completely. "But that need not concern you. You died in a tragic hunting accident, remember? The kingdom has mourned and moved on." The soldiers closed in, torchlight gleaming off drawn swords. Helena clutched William's arm, her mind racing desperately for some way out, some strategy they might employ. But they were outnumbered, surrounded, with nowhere to run. William seemed to reach the same conclusion. His shoulders straightened, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of royalty. "I will go with you peacefully, Edmund, on one condition. The woman is innocent in all this. Let her go free, unharmed." Edmund's eyes narrowed as he studied Helena, taking in her simple dress, her frightened but defiant expression. "The peasant girl. What is she to you, my lord? A forest dalliance to pass the time while you hid from your responsibilities." William's hand tightened around Helena's, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Choose your next words with care, Captain. This woman saved my life when my own brother sought to end it. She is under my protection." A tense silence fell over the clearing. The soldiers exchanged glances, some uneasy, others curious. Edmund's face betrayed nothing as he considered William's demand. "Very well," he said finally. "The girl may go. We have no quarrel with her." Relief flooded through Helena, quickly replaced by anguish. "Go where? Do what?" The thought of leaving William to face his treacherous brother alone was unbearable. "No," she said, stepping forward to stand beside William. "I will not leave him." William turned to her, his blue eyes fierce with emotion. "Helena, please, this is the only way. Go to the village, to your father, stay safe. And what will happen to you?" she demanded, tears threatening to spill over. "Your brother tried to kill you once. Do you think he'll hesitate to finish the job now?" Edmund's patience visibly thinned. "Enough of this. Seize the prince. If the girl interferes, take her too." The soldiers moved forward as one. William made a split-second decision that would haunt Helena's dreams for days to come. He pulled her close, pressing a fierce, desperate kiss to her lips. "I love you," he whispered against her mouth. "Never forget that." Then, before she could respond, he shoved her roughly toward the edge of the clearing, toward the only gap in the circle of soldiers, and charged in the opposite direction, drawing all attention to himself. "Run!" he shouted as the soldiers converged on him. "Run, Helena!" Confusion erupted in the clearing. Some soldiers moved to pursue Helena, but Edmund bellowed, "Leave her! Secure the prince!" Helena stumbled backward, tears blinding her, watching in horror as William fought valiantly, but was eventually overwhelmed by sheer numbers. They forced him to his knees, binding his hands behind his back. "Take him to the castle," Edmund ordered. "Prince Richard will want to greet his long-lost brother personally." As they dragged William away, he managed one last look at Helena, still frozen at the edge of the clearing. His eyes held no regret, only a fierce determination that somehow kindled a matching resolve in her heart. She waited until the sounds of the soldiers faded before collapsing to her knees, great, wrenching sobs tearing from her throat. The pack containing the crown lay forgotten beside her, its precious cargo now the only proof of William's rightful claim. When at last her tears subsided, Helena rose to her feet, a new purpose hardening her features. William had sacrificed himself to give her a chance to escape. She would not waste it. Somehow, she would find a way to save him, to expose Richard's treachery, to set things right. "I'm coming for you," she whispered into the night, as if her words could reach him across the distance. "Wait for me, my love. Wait for me." The capital city of Ravenwood rose like a stone giant against the morning sky, its towers and spires reaching toward heaven as if in supplication. Helena stood on a hill overlooking the sprawling metropolis, her clothes travel-worn, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes burning with determination. 3 days of hard travel had brought her here, following the main road with the blood-stained crown carefully wrapped and hidden in her pack. She had abandoned stealth for speed, knowing that each passing hour placed William in greater danger. Now, as she gazed upon the city where his treacherous brother held power, doubt briefly clouded her resolve. How would she, a simple blacksmith's daughter, gain access to the royal castle? How would she convince anyone of the truth when she had only her word and a bloodied crown as evidence? "For William," she whispered to herself, clutching the strap of her pack tighter. "For love." The city streets were a cacophony of sounds and smells. Merchants hawking their wares, children darting between market stalls, the pungent aroma of livestock mingling with the sweeter scents of baking bread and spices. Helena moved through the crowds with purpose, her hood pulled low over her face, listening intently to the gossip that flowed as freely as ale in a tavern. "The King Regent has scheduled the coronation for the week's end," a fishmonger told his customer, leaning close as if imparting a great secret. "They say King Edward won't last the month and Prince Richard doesn't want to waste time." "Convenient timing," the customer replied with a meaningful look. "First his brother dies in a hunting accident, then the old king falls gravely ill." "Hush," the fishmonger warned, casting a nervous glance at a passing guard. "Those aren't thoughts to voice aloud these days." Helena moved on, her heart pounding. The coronation was mere days away. Once Richard wore the crown officially, challenging, his claim would become nearly impossible. She had even less time than she'd feared. The royal castle dominated the city's central hill, its massive stone walls and imposing gates patrolled by guards in gleaming armor. Helena circled it twice, studying the entrances, noting the changing of the guards, searching for any weakness in its formidable defenses. There was none to be found. As dusk approached, bringing with it a gentle rain that cleared the streets of all but the most determined travelers, Helena found herself at the steps of the city's great cathedral. Desperate and out of options, she entered the sacred space, hoping to find a moment's respite and clarity. The cathedral's interior soared above her, its stained glass windows dimmed by the fading light outside. A few worshippers knelt in prayer, and near the altar, a group of clerics conversed in hushed tones. Among them stood an elderly man whose simple robes belied the respect with which the others treated him. Helena approached cautiously, drawn by some instinct she couldn't name. As she drew nearer, she caught fragments of their conversation, most irregular. Proceeding with the coronation while King Edward still draws breath, the old man was saying, his voice firm despite his years. And without the royal crown at that, a circlet crafted anew cannot carry the same blessing. Father Thomas, one of the younger clerics, protested. The royal crown was lost with Prince William. Prince Richard decrees many things of late, Father Thomas interrupted, his bushy white eyebrows drawing together. That does not make them right or holy. Helena's breath caught in her throat. Here, perhaps, was an ally, one with access to the castle and the ear of those in power. She waited until the other clerics had departed before approaching the elderly priest. Father, she said, bowing her head respectfully, might I speak with you on a matter of grave importance? The old man studied her with shrewd eyes that missed nothing, not her travel-worn appearance, nor the intensity of her gaze, nor the way her hand protectively clutched her pack. Come, child, he said finally, gesturing toward a small side chapel where they might speak privately. Tell me what troubles you so deeply. Once they were alone, Helena took a deep breath and placed her trust in fate. I have come from the forest with news that will shake the kingdom to its foundations. Prince William lives. Father Thomas's lined face remained impassive, though his eyes sharpened with interest. A bold claim. What proof have you? With trembling hands, Helena unwrapped the crown from its hiding place. The gold gleamed in the candlelight, the dried blood still visible on its ornate surface. I found this the day I found him, wounded and without memory. I nursed him back to health, not knowing his identity until his memory returned. The priest's hands, gnarled with age but steady, reached for the crown. He examined it carefully, turning it over to reveal the royal insignia engraved inside the band. This is indeed the royal crown, he murmured. And the blood? His brother's attempt to murder him, Helena replied, her voice hardening. Prince Richard left him for dead in the forest, but William survived. 3 nights ago, the royal guards found our hiding place. William sacrificed himself so I could escape with the crown, the proof of his rightful claim. Father Thomas was silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Helena held her breath, aware that her entire plan hinged on this man's belief and willingness to help. These are dangerous accusations, he said finally. If what you say is true, you place yourself in grave peril by coming here. If false, you commit treason by merely speaking such words. Helena met his gaze unflinchingly. I would risk far more for the truth, Father, and for him. Something in her voice, in the steady conviction of her eyes, seemed to reach the old priest. He nodded slowly, a decision visibly forming behind his eyes. Tomorrow is the feast of St. Michael, he said. There will be a special council meeting in the Great Hall before the evening feast. All the nobles will be present, as will the King Regent. As High Priest, I have the right to bring matters of royal succession before the council. He held up the crown. This gives us the authority to demand Prince William's presence. Hope surged in Helena's heart. You believe me then? I believe that something foul has occurred, Father Thomas replied carefully. And I have known Prince Richard since he was a boy. His ambition has always outstripped his honor. He fixed Helena with a piercing stare. But know this. If you appear before the council, there will be no turning back. Richard will recognize the threat you pose immediately. I understand, Helena said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. I am ready." The following day passed in a blur of preparation. Father Thomas provided Helena with clean clothing befitting a yeoman's daughter, not so fine as to draw attention, but respectable enough to appear before the council. She bathed and washed her hair, transforming from a forest-dwelling fugitive into a woman of quiet dignity. As the cathedral bells tolled the hour of the council meeting, Helena stood outside the great hall's massive oak doors, the crown once again wrapped and hidden within a leather satchel. Father Thomas stood beside her, his ceremonial robes lending him an air of unquestionable authority. "Remember," he murmured as the guards prepared to open the doors, "speak only when addressed directly. Let the crown be your strongest argument." Helena nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. Within those doors waited Richard, the man who had tried to murder his own brother, who now held William prisoner somewhere within the castle walls. The man she must face if she had any hope of saving the one she loved. The doors swung open, and the herald's voice rang out. "His Eminence, Father Thomas, High Priest of Ravenwood, seeks audience with the council on a matter of royal succession." A hush fell over the assembled nobles as Helena followed Father Thomas into the vast chamber. At the far end, seated upon a throne slightly smaller than the great royal seat beside it, sat a man whose features were hauntingly familiar. The same dark hair, the same strong jawline as William, but with eyes cold as winter frost. Prince. Richard leaned forward, his gaze narrowing as it fell upon Helena. For a heartbeat, confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by dawning recognition and carefully controlled fury. "What is the meaning of this interruption, Father Thomas?" he demanded, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "And who is this woman you bring before the royal council?" Father Thomas bowed with perfect courtesy that nonetheless contained no true deference. "My Lord Regent, I bring before you and this council a matter of grave importance concerning the royal succession." He gestured to Helena. "This woman has traveled far to present evidence that touches the very foundation of your regency." Richard's knuckles whitened where they gripped the arms of his throne, but his face remained a mask of polite interest. "Indeed, then let her speak." All eyes turned to Helena. The weight of their stares, curious, dismissive, hostile, threatened to crush her resolve. But then she thought of William, perhaps imprisoned in some dungeon beneath her very feet, waiting for help that might never come if she faltered now. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong as it echoed through the hushed chamber. "My name is Helena, daughter of the blacksmith of Oakvale. 1 month ago, I found a man gravely wounded in the forest, a man whom all of you were told had died in a hunting accident." She reached into her satchel and withdrew the crown, holding it high for all to see. "Prince William lives, and his brother, who sits before you now as regent, is the one who attempted to murder him." The great hall erupted into chaos. Nobles rose from their seats, voices raised in shock and disbelief. The crown in Helena's hands caught the light streaming through the high windows, the dried blood still visible on its golden surface. Richard remained frozen on his throne, his face a mask of carefully controlled fury as he stared at the physical evidence of his treachery. "Silence!" he finally roared, rising to his feet. The hall gradually quieted, though an undercurrent of whispers continued to ripple through the assembled nobles. Richard's cold eyes fixed on Helena with lethal intensity. "This is absurd. A peasant girl with wild accusations and a stolen crown. Guards, seize her!" Several guards moved forward, hands on their sword hilts, but Father Thomas stepped between them and Helena. "My Lord Regent," he said, his aged voice carrying surprising authority, "before you dismiss this woman's claims, I would remind the council that this is indeed the royal crown, the very one reported lost with Prince William's supposed death." He turned to address the gathered nobles. "Many of you have served the royal family for decades. You know this crown, and you know that if Prince William lives, he is the rightful heir to the throne. An elderly nobleman with a silver beard rose shakily to his feet. The priest speaks truly. I recognize the royal crown. Those sapphires were set by my own grandfather's hands. His rheumy eyes narrowed at Richard. If Prince William lives, these are grave accusations indeed. Richard's jaw clenched visibly. The woman is clearly deranged with grief or ambition. Perhaps she found the crown where my poor brother fell, and has concocted this fantasy. Then produce him, Helena interrupted, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. If I lie, bring Prince William before this council to denounce me himself. A murmur of agreement swept through the hall. Richard's eyes darted around the chamber, assessing his support among the nobles. Helena could see his mind working, calculating his options. Very well, he said finally, his tone dangerously smooth. Captain Edmund, bring the prisoner from the North Tower. Helena's heart leapt into her throat. William was alive and here in the castle. She fought to keep her expression neutral, though her hands trembled where they still clutched the crown. The minutes that followed stretched like hours. The hall remained tense with anticipation, nobles whispering among themselves while Richard sat rigid upon his throne, his gaze never leaving Helena. She met his stare unflinchingly, drawing strength from the knowledge that soon William would appear. The great doors swung open at last. Captain Edmund entered, flanked by two guards who half led, half dragged a prisoner between them. Helena's breath caught in her throat. William's fine clothes had been replaced by simple prison garb. His face was bruised, and several days' growth of beard shadowed his jaw. Yet he stood tall, his bearing regal despite his circumstances. His eyes, when they met Helena's across the hall, filled with a mixture of shock, joy, and fear for her safety. "My lords and ladies of the council," Edmund announced, "as commanded by His Highness the Regent, I present the prisoner who claims to be Prince William." "Claims?" William's voice rang out, strong and clear despite his imprisonment. "I am William, firstborn son of King Edward, rightful heir to the throne of Ravenwood." His gaze swept the chamber, recognition dawning on many faces. "Many of you dandled me on your knees as a child. Many more have ridden at my side, dined at my table, sworn oaths of fealty to me and my father." Several nobles nodded, murmuring in agreement. Richard rose from his throne, his face twisted with barely contained rage. "This is a pretender, some peasant who bears a passing resemblance to my dear departed brother." "Enough lies, Richard." William cut him off, his voice hardening. "You struck me down in the forest and left me for dead. But for the grace of God and the courage of this woman," he nodded toward Helena, "your fratricide would have succeeded." Richard's hand moved to the dagger at his belt, his control slipping. "You dare?" "I dare to speak the truth," William replied, then turned to address the council. "My lords and ladies, look upon the crown this brave woman has brought before. You see the blood that still stains it, my blood, spilled by my brother's hand when he tore it from my head and believed me dead." The hall had grown deathly quiet, all eyes moving between the twin brothers, one imprisoned but unbowed, the other free but increasingly desperate. "This is treason," Richard hissed, drawing his dagger. "Guards, arrest them all!" But the guards hesitated, looking uncertainly between Richard and William, between the regent's orders and the blood-stained crown that offered silent testimony to a terrible crime. It was Father Thomas who broke the impasse. He stepped forward, taking the crown from Helena's hands and holding it high. "Let us settle this matter as our laws demand. The royal crown of Ravenwood carries within it a divine blessing. Tradition holds that it will rest easily only on the brow of the rightful king." He turned to Richard. "My Lord Regent, if you are indeed the rightful heir as you claim, place the crown upon your head before these witnesses." Color drained from Richard's face. The ancient tradition was well known to all present, a superstition perhaps, but one deeply embedded in the kingdom's history and the noble's consciousness. "This is absurd," Richard blustered, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "I will not participate in peasant superstitions." "Then I shall," William said, stepping forward despite his guard's hands on his arms. "Release me and let the crown decide." A tense silence fell over the hall. Then, from the back of the chamber, a new voice spoke, frail but commanding. "Yes, let the crown decide." All heads turned to see King Edward himself, pale and trembling, leaning heavily on the arm of his physician. The old king had dragged himself from his sickbed to witness the confrontation. "Father!" both brothers exclaimed in unison. "I have heard enough," the king said, each word clearly costing him great effort. "The crown will judge." No one dared disobey the king's direct command. William's guards released him, and he walked steadily to stand before Father Thomas. The elderly priest placed the crown carefully upon William's head. It fit perfectly, seeming to catch the light even more brilliantly than before. A collective gasp went up from the assembled nobles. "The crown accepts him," Father Thomas proclaimed. "Before God and these witnesses, I recognize William as the true heir to the throne of Ravenwood." Richard, seeing his ambitions crumbling before his eyes, made one last desperate move. With a cry of rage, he lunged forward, dagger raised to strike at his brother, but he had underestimated Helena's vigilance. She threw herself between the brothers, catching Richard's wrist with both hands. They struggled briefly before the guards, their loyalty now firmly decided, seized Richard and disarmed him. "Take him away," King Edward commanded, his voice stronger. Now, despite his frail condition, he will face proper justice for his crimes. As Richard was dragged from the hall, his face contorted with hatred and thwarted ambition, William turned to Helena. Before the entire court, he took her hands in his. "You risked everything for me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your courage, your loyalty, your love, they humble me." He glanced at his father, who watched them with tired but keen eyes. "Father, this woman saved my life. She tended my wounds, sheltered me when I had lost even my own name, and then braved untold dangers to bring the truth to light." King Edward studied Helena with surprising warmth. "Then we owe her a debt beyond measure." "More than a debt," William replied, his eyes never leaving Helena's face. "I owe her my heart, which I freely gave during those days in the forest." He dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "Helena, daughter of Oakvale, will you consent to be my wife, my queen, and my partner in all things?" Helena's eyes filled with tears of joy. The journey that had begun with a blood-stained crown in the forest had led her here to a love she had never dreamed possible. "Yes," she whispered, then louder for all to hear, "yes, with all my heart." 1 week later, in a ceremony both solemn and joyous, William was formally recognized as heir apparent, the crown, now cleaned of blood and polished, to a brilliant shine, placed upon his head by his father's trembling hands. At his side stood Helena, no longer in simple homespun, but draped in a gown of deep emerald that matched her eyes, a circlet of silver leaves crowning her chestnut hair. The court had whispered, of course, a blacksmith's daughter as their future queen. But those whispers died quickly when the story of her courage spread throughout the kingdom. The woman who had found a bloodied crown in the forest, who had nursed a prince back to health not knowing his identity, who had then braved the treacherous court to save him and expose a would-be fratricide, such a woman, many agreed, had proven her worthiness far more thoroughly than any high-born lady who had never faced adversity. King Edward, his health improved somewhat by the joy of his true heir's return, blessed their union personally. "Love," he told them in a private moment before the wedding ceremony, "is the strongest foundation for any reign. It has been my one regret that I married for alliance rather than affection. You, my son, are wiser than I was." Under a canopy of spring blossoms in the royal garden, William and Helena exchanged their vows, Their eyes held the memory of those first days in the forest cottage, of wounds healed, of trust formed, of love blooming unexpectedly between a lost prince and the woman who had found him. As William placed a ring upon Helena's finger, he whispered words meant for her alone. From blood and darkness came our beginning, but our future shall be filled with light. Helena smiled up at him, her heart so full she could scarcely breathe. And love, she whispered back. Always love. The crown that had once lain bloodied and abandoned among the forest roots now rested securely upon William's head, a symbol not only of his rightful place, but of the extraordinary journey that had brought them both to this moment. A journey that had begun with a single fateful step when Helena had stumbled upon a blood-stained crown and unknowingly her destiny. What would you do if fate placed a royal crown stained with blood in your path? Would you have the courage to follow where it led, even if that journey took you from the safety of everything you've known into the dangerous heart of royal intrigue? Helena's story reminds us that true nobility isn't found in bloodlines or titles, but in the choices we make when faced with danger, injustice, and love. In a world where power corrupts and ambition blinds, it was the simple blacksmith's daughter who showed the greatest courage, not just in saving William's life in that forest, but in risking everything to stand before a kingdom and speak truth to power. Perhaps the most profound crowns we wear are not made of gold and jewels, but of the love we give freely and the sacrifices we make for those we cherish. When life presents you with unexpected crossroads, will you choose the safe path, or will you, like Helena, follow your heart even when it leads to the most daunting challenges? If this tale of courage, sacrifice, and love against all odds touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who appreciates stories of extraordinary love. Subscribe to our channel for more captivating medieval romances that will transport you to worlds where passion and destiny intertwine. Until our next journey together, remember that sometimes the most remarkable stories begin with a single, unexpected discovery in the most ordinary of places.